Hello, everybody, and welcome to week 7, the Edge Breakdown with Papy and myself. And Papy wrote up the Bucks and Panthers game this week, which obviously, right, we're going to have to start with the big news. If it wasn't already abundant, they were in full tank mode, right? And it is now. Now, as a 49ers fan, I'm very excited that we traded for CMC.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean that's and less than I thought we would give up. When I saw a trade, I'm like, ugh, like I hope we didn't have to give up too much. And I mean, while it's 4 picks, I think the juice is worth the squeeze with the team we have here, right? I was talking to Hilo about this earlier today, and essentially we have the best catching running back in the NFL and the best running wide receiver in the NFL now, added with Ayuk, added with Kittle, and a top defense. I'm excited to see what we can do. But meanwhile, the Panthers in 2022 have an official team total below 14 points.
They do,
something
man.
I did not think I would see in 2022.
Yeah, I didn't think they could go much lower, but they managed to do it. Maybe we'll see it get down to 12.
I mean, they could still trade DJ Moore, which I would be very happy about.
He's got a one out. I mean, you know, he's got a one out.
Yeah, right. Like at this point, like just take the draft picks and go. You made it clear, you know, you don't want to go anywhere, right? Like get some draft picks for them, send them to a contender, and my season long shares would very much appreciate it, along with my best ball.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so this was, this is a game I kind of had my eye on, anyways, just because of what we just said, how bad the Panthers are, how terrible their pass D's been, right? They finally got rid of Rule, right? I mean, they're a hot mess. And this isn't a bring back game, but I'm curious to see, like, do you think, because they've shown it in the past, do you really see an opportunity here with the Bucks just turning it on and putting up 45? Do you see any positive signs for that?
Yep. So this is a really interesting game to me. It's probably the uniquest game that I've written up in my 2 years doing the Edge, because typically we focus on analytics and what's going on the field, coverages, the X's and O's, because that is what ultimately normally makes the difference in what happens. But this game, because we have one team that has really given up earlier than any team I can think of in recent NFL history. I mean, this type of a give up is like MLB Pirates, reminiscent where like a month into the season, you're like, we got JT Brubaker out there. It's probably not going to be too good. So, that's what this feels like. And that's not a very common thing in the NFL, right? So, right. When we're looking at the Panthers and you say, okay, you guys are basically rolling over more than any NFL team really has that I can think of. And then you look at the Bucks and you say, well, even though the Bucks are 3-3, they're still a pretty strong roster from, a skill standpoint. All of their receivers are pretty strong. Brady is obviously still Brady. Fournette has looked good in the last couple of years. The defense is very strong. So, the Bucks are going to kill them. And really, instead of breaking down the X's and O's, it's more of how badly do you think they're going to kill them, right? Because
right.
If they're content to win something like 24/7, which I think I say in the write-up, that probably won't produce any, have to have it stat line or maybe one, versus, if the Bucks basically take the mindset of, we're going to come out here and beat you 50-0, to show the world that, we're still the Bucks and, we don't care that you guys are basically willing to just roll over. That's really the decision point in this game for me. And I think that the Bucks are going to be willing to beat them 50-0, in my opinion. I think that is the most likely outcome. Now, I kind of wish I had the guts to play like a Brady, Goodwin, Evans, Bucks D stack, like on my, main roster in smaller 3 entries and single. Like a big part of me wants to like have the balls to do that. I don't know that I will. There is a lot of risk in that type of a strategy, right? Like they don't have to crush them mercilessly to win,
right.
But I do think that they will. And so for me, I think that's what puts it in kind of an MME play, or maybe out of the 5 lineups, I tend to bet more on maybe a 4th or 5th lineup. I might play like a Brady, Evans, Goodwin stack with the Bucs D. I think that's the actual interesting thing for me that I'm really interested in doing is actually playing a Bucs offense stack with the Bucs D, which is something I very rarely do. But very rarely do we see a game like this where, a 49-3 drubbing feels almost probable. So I mean, I think that's kind of how I feel about it.
My only worry on I like the D. My only worry on the D side is they're just not going to do enough for them to generate the few extra points we want, right? That maybe the Bucs D ends at 10 or 12 points, right? Versus, we're hoping that 18 to 25 range, right? Points wise. But at the same time, right? If one of the things that sticks out to me is now let's go to the other side of the ball. Let's go to the Panthers D side, right? If you're Shaq and these other guys, how committed are you to killing yourself right now, right? When they've just given up, right? Like, I think it's going to be like, do I really want to push that hard? And if I get, for me, you said it, I don't know that I have the guts on my 3 maxes to do it because I'm a single entry 3 max guy. I don't know if I have the guts, but I sure want to work up to it. And if the ownership's low enough, I might do it. I might just, if it comes in so low that I think it's going to give me a leverage point, because I'm trying to win, right? Like, I either want to be first or I want to be last. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to lose all my money, but I don't really care about finishing, 317th or 27th. Like, great, I made my money back, but I'm not trying to finish it. I want to finish first. Or I want to completely whiff so bad that, hey, if things would have gone the other way, right, I would have won, right? So that's kind of one of the ways I approach it.
Yeah, I think that anyone who's won, big tournaments in DFS will tell you that you kind of have to have that mindset of first or last because, min cashing is great. It keeps you in it or whatever. But anyone who's made money in DFS has done it in big weeks. And so, that's how you win. And so you have to kind of have that mindset. And how silly will you feel if the Bucs do beat them 49-3 and it's like, Brady has 400 yards and 5 touchdowns and, 2 of them are to Goodwin and 2 of them are to Evans. And you're like, why didn't I just take the Bucs against a team that is literally belly up, giving up? Why didn't it's pretty obvious. So it's one of those things where we feel the caution of like, hey, taking, a big stack here in a game that is going to be a blowout, has a lot of risk because what if they, just beat them by a normal amount? But then if they do beat them 49-3, you sit here, look, scratching your head like, why did I think hard about that? Right. It's like the most obvious thing. And then if they even have low ownership, or as you alluded to, which they almost certainly will have very low combinational ownership, you feel even sillier because you're like, it's the most obvious thing and no one did it, and me included. Right. So it's definitely something I want exposure to. I don't know that I'll have the guts to do it on a single entry 3 max team. I'm debating it. That's definitely a decision point for me this week. And if I do it, I will probably try to have the guts to also play the Bucs D, which is really the same risk as the offense, like you're saying, right? Like they just beat them in like a normal type game where they don't get a lot of. The Panthers give up so much, all they do is run up the middle and run out the clock, right? And they end up with like 7 points and 2 sacks or something, So it's kind of the same risk as the offense. So I feel like if I'm taking the risk on the offense that they're going to win 50-0, I want to take the risk on the defense that they win 50-0 and get a defensive TD as one of the TDs,
Yeah, and I mean, how, right? Like, you can see the path there, right? The whole, if this happens, then this, right? Like, when we always ask ourselves that question, it's one that, right? Like, everybody, I think, was probably going to be more like, hey, do we run CMC back at this, right? Do we take the Brady, Godwin, mixtures of Evans, Otten, you talked about Lenny Stacks, and bring them back with CMC. That was, I think, the plan. I think everybody's going to turn off of it now. And I think it's going to give us maybe a really unique one-off. And like you said, if we look back this week and we both don't play it, they went 49-3. We'll both just like we did, we should have. Right?
Yeah, like most obvious thing of the week, right? Of course, Brady's upset. He's yelling at the O-line. He's playing the team that's given up. He's going to paste him, right? 49-3. Like, how did I not just load up there? The other thing I think is interesting in this game is Mike Evans just regardless of the game environment and kind of what happens. He's the only player to me that I think maybe I would play on his own or play outside of this game environment. And really, that's honestly a lot kind of fitting with this game, his narrative, because he complained. And when you look at how well he's played this year and you look at how well he played last week, I mean, he was being covered by a Steelers practice squad player who me as a Steelers fan, avid Steelers fan, I didn't even know who he was, until I saw him on the field. I was like, who is Johnson or Jack? I still don't even know who Johnson, Jackson. He's one of those two. He's a guy they called up from, the practice squad. He's covering Evans and, they throw him the ball 4 times. He catches all 4. And they lose this game, right? So, it's not as if this is just a coasting type game. And, he kind of had a right to complain. And so I feel like Brady is the type of quarterback who will hear that, especially in a situation where it was really kind of justified. And he'll try to get him going. And I just can't see the Panthers stopping whatever the Bucs want to do. And even if they win 24-7, if what they want to do is get Evans 2 of those touchdowns, I feel like that's what's going to happen. So, I think Evans is the one guy I'm most interested from either side.
So no, not interested in Lenny at all this week. His price is pretty high too.
What really worries me about Fournette is that, and I think people misinterpret him a little bit, is that he actually has his big games and games the Bucs lose but are competitive, where there's a long period of time where he's catching little 5 to 10 yard underneath passes from Brady, and he ends up with those 10 reception type lines for 80 or 95 yards. Those are the games where he really posts his ceiling games. He doesn't actually tend to post his ceiling games in games where the Bucs smash them. And not to say he can't, right? If they really beat him 49-3, right? Of course, he could have 2 of the TDs and 100 yards. But typically for him, the competitive games where maybe the Bucs lose a close game or win a close game are better for him. So I think that that, along with the fact that there's all this stuff swirling around Brady and that he's going to want to throw the ball into the end zone, makes me, out of all of the Bucs, probably less enthusiastic about Fournette. And what you said too about his price also now, really creeping up there into the elite range. You kind of feel like he's not going to pay off that price tag very often. So he's the one I would say that's the most cautious. By the way, the other way that you could go here, if you're brave, right, and you want to say like the Panthers D takes a totally different mindset of a like us against the world, right? Like, all right, they're giving up, you know what, but we're all still here and we're at home and we're going to get fired up for this game and show everybody, we're not just rolling over. That's the other outtake here. And then if you also pair that with, hey, the Bucs offense, right, has really not been very good. And even though they're talented, they have lost 3 out of the last 4 games. And maybe Brady's finally, over the hill. It happens quick, right? If you want to take that approach, you can certainly play the Panthers defense for free at no ownership. And, there will probably be maybe 1 or 2 MME teams, certainly not teams I'm betting a ton on, but 1 or 2 Millie Maker only teams for me that I probably do that on, that I probably play the Panthers D, nobody else, and kind of take that mindset of, what if they get fired up for this game, world's against them, us against the world, and come out and play hard, So that's also an angle you could take here.
That's a brave angle.
It's brave. It's brave.
That's braver. That's braver than the Tampa staff for sure. But again, right, like you said, it's free. It's going to unlock so much stuff in your lineup, and it's going to be no ownership, right? Mm-hmm. And like you said, I mean, can you see a path there where they come out and do it? While their pass D hasn't been as good, they've been mediocre on the run side. So if they come out, they're fired up. Brady is 45. Maybe they get a couple sacks, and get 1 interception. And if it's a pick 6, all of a sudden you're going to be really right. I mean, that leverage on the field that's how you win a Millie Maker, right? Is that kind of no ownership leverage is how you get there.
Right. And that's that's why I say, for me, I think that's a Millie Maker only play, right? But when you think about how to win a tournament with hundreds of thousands of entries, and you think, could the Bucs fail here? I mean, they could. The Panthers could do that exact us against the world, and they haven't really traded any defensive players away, right? So maybe the defense says, you're giving up on offense, but we're gonna show you we can still keep us in this game. you could see it, and maybe it's even just a fluke. They're just playing hard, and someone tips the ball and they get a pick six, right? And if that happens, like you said, that's the type of play that could win you a lot of money. So it's brave. It's not something I would do on a team I'm betting in single entries or 3 entries, but it is something I'll probably do on 1 or 2 teams I'm just playing in the Millie Maker.
Interesting. That is definitely a take. I don't think you're going to see a lot of places this week. So as we end up here, right? Anything on the prop side that you've really looked at this week that sticks out to you, any lines you've liked? I think a lot of the lines are really tight this week. I think they've actually done a pretty good job capping them, unfortunately.
So I think they actually have done a pretty good job. I don't typically get into my props until Saturday night as much, and
Okay.
that's when I really start to look at them and see what's going on there with the props. But so I don't have one off the top of my head I can give you that I think is like way off. But I actually did glance at them. I always glance at them just so I can know which way things are moving. And I agree with you. They look pretty tight this week. There wasn't anything that I caught my eye as to like, oh my God, that's like, that's easy. That's not even close.
Right.
I don't really have one of those this week at first look.
Yeah, me and Jay were talking earlier, and it's just like, man, the board's tight this week on the NFL side. Right. And we are, right. We're getting close to halfway through the season. We know who's who. We know, how offenses are running. And so they're definitely they're a little bit tighter there this week. Well, there is a great way to look at this game that, like I said, you're probably not going to hear anywhere else besides here. And more importantly, I think the takeaway from that is the mindset of how to approach a game, right? Make sure you're not just pigeonholing yourself into saying this is the only path, right? The only path is the Bucs are just going to obliterate a Panthers team that's given up. Be willing to take a step back and look at the other side and say, hey, is there a path on where this could happen? Even if it's a super small percent, that critical thinking is always going to put you ahead of the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And always, if you are a player that plays some multi-entry in big tournaments only and plays single and 3 entry max, realize that you should be taking different approaches there and, try to differentiate those plays. Whereas like a Panthers D is only MME play, and maybe the Bucs stacks can, if you're brave, be strong enough to be in a single entry or 3 entry. So start thinking that way, and you'll be a better DFS player.
Yeah, because you know what ended up tonight, Tyrese Halliburton in the NBA, he was projected at 30% ownership. He's 57%. He landed on because he was right because of his price. So that's right. Those are the things you're trying to avoid when you're trying to win a big tourney, right? Is someone that's going to land there.
Yeah, I mean, when you have guys, I mean, there were some guys like that last week that were not quite 57%, but I think Eno Benjamin was way up there last week. And it's not that he's a bad play; he was kind of a free square play, and I used him in lineups. But I knew, hey, don't put this guy into all of your lineups here because obviously there's a lot of leverage in him failing. And I wrote up the Jets game last week. I was high on Bryce Hall, so he was a core running back for me. So my teams that did well were teams that were on him and Ramadre mostly. And so you look at that and you say, okay, well, if I would have just played the guy who was kind of obvious free square, well, didn't really work out that well. So we never know as much as we think, right? Like we never know, we're never that accurate. And so if you really just err on the side of saying I'm going to go kind of a different direction, you're probably going to be better off, especially in tournaments a lot of the time.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, thanks for coming on this week. Stay tuned to see this as this weekly gets going forward, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. I'll see you guys.